Your evil and jealousy, that's what led to it.
Tiffany, an exception.
Me and my sister went somewhere and her child's father was following us.
It was just after.
And you had them do this. Now all you guys' life are ruined. You guys ruined our lives, took her away from us and her daughter. Like, it's crazy. All for what? She thought she could defuse the situation because she knew the guys. They were her baby dad's friend. About people, like, literally, like, you know, start calling police and making reports and protect yourself by any means, like, because you never know what could.
Love to Death Channel 2:30 a.m., Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. A 911 call comes in. Possible home invasion at the Eden Park Apartments. Officers arrive. The front door is broken open. Inside, a woman is on the floor, multiple gunshot wounds to her torso. Her boyfriend is already outside. He jumped from a second-story window the moment the door came in. The woman's name is Zaria McKeever. She is 23 years old. She does not survive. Within hours, police have 5 people in custody. The youngest is 15. The man who organized it, the one who bought the gun, gave the order and drove the car, is her ex-boyfriend, the father of her child. He never went inside. He sat outside and waited while 2 teenagers carried out what he didn't have the nerve to do himself. This is that case, and it gets worse before it makes any kind of sense. Zaria McKeever was 23, a mother, and someone actively trying to build something real for herself. She had just enrolled at PCI Academy in Plymouth, Minnesota, cosmetology school. She'd lost an older sister years before. She knew what grief cost. She wasn't drifting, she was moving forward, deliberately, with a 1-year-old daughter depending on her to get there. Her ex-boyfriend was Erick Haynes. They shared that daughter. They did not share a future, and that was Zaria's decision, not his. Haynes did not take that well. For weeks before her death, Zaria had been dealing with him showing up, calls, threats, his car appearing where it had no business being. Her sister Tiffany later described the day before the shooting as a typical day, with one exception. The 2 of them went out together, and Haynes followed them. Zaria knew what was happening. She'd told her boyfriend that Haynes had been harassing her, stalking her, threatening her by phone and in person. This wasn't new information to the people around her. It was a pattern they could all see. What they didn't know was how far he was willing to take it. Haynes had already been convicted twice for violating domestic abuse protection orders, once in October 2019, again in December of the same year. 2 convictions, 2 separate violations, 2 separate times a court told him to stay away from someone, and he decided that didn't apply to him. So, by November 2022, this wasn't a man who had simply lost his temper. This was a man with a documented history of deciding that other people's boundaries and court orders were optional. Zaria had moved on, new apartment, new boyfriend, new direction, and Haynes, watching all of it from the outside, arrived at what he apparently considered a solution. He bought a gun. He found 2 teenagers, a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, connected to him through his own social circle. And he gave one of them that gun. The plan, as Haynes later admitted it, was this. The teens would kick in Zaria's door, beat up her new boyfriend, and shoot Zaria if she got in the way. And Haynes would wait in the car. That was the plan, from a grown man who had a child with this woman. Just after 2:30 in the morning on November 8th, 2022, the 2 teenagers approached the Eden Park Apartments. No one answered when they knocked, or maybe they didn't bother knocking. Either way, they kicked the door in. Zaria's boyfriend heard it happen. He had enough time to get to a bedroom window and drop out of it. He hit the ground outside and called 911. Inside the apartment, Zaria didn't make it out. Her sister Tiffany later offered the only explanation that made sense to anyone. Zaria knew these teenagers. They were connected to Haynes, which meant she recognized them. And knowing her, Tiffany said she probably thought she could talk them down, diffuse it, because she knew them. The 15-year-old fired multiple times. Zaria was hit in her lower torso. She was on the floor when officers arrived minutes later. Despite everything the paramedics did, she was pronounced dead at the scene. The 17-year-old was shot in the leg, likely in the chaos of his own gunfire, though the exact circumstances aren't fully detailed in available records. Haynes, still waiting nearby, drove him to get medical attention. That was his version of cleaning up. Police found the gun hidden in the wheel well of a Dodge Charger parked near the complex. It matched the cartridges recovered from Zaria's apartment. Security footage from the building confirmed what the boyfriend had told them. And it showed a vehicle connected to Haynes at that complex multiple times in the days before the shooting. He had been watching her, planning, returning. The night of November 8th wasn't impulsive. It was the end of something he'd been working toward. Within hours, 5 people were in custody. Ages ranged from 15 to 24. And Erick Haynes, the man who bought the gun, made the plan, drove the car, and sent 2 teenagers through that door, was among them. When police spoke with him, he didn't pretend he had nothing to do with it. He admitted he was angry about the relationship ending. He admitted he went there that night to have the boyfriend beaten. He admitted he gave the teens the gun and told them to shoot Zaria if she interfered. He just wanted everyone to know he stayed in the car, as if that was going to matter. Love to Death Channel. People arrested, a dead woman, a boyfriend who survived by jumping out a window, 2 teenagers with a gun that wasn't theirs, and a man sitting in a parking lot who thought distance from the door meant distance from the crime. It didn't. Hennepin County charged Erick Haynes with second-degree murder, both intentional and unintentional counts. The 2 teenagers were taken into juvenile custody, and prosecutors moved quickly to push their cases into adult court. All 5 people connected to that night ended up facing charges. The investigation itself wasn't complicated. Haynes had confessed the core of it. The footage confirmed the rest. A K-9 unit found the gun. The cartridges matched. The car was on camera at the complex multiple times before the shooting. There wasn't much to untangle. What got complicated was what came next. The case drew attention almost immediately, and not just because of what happened to Zaria. It drew attention because of how the county handled the teenagers. Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty offered the teen gunman, Faux Camara, who was 15 at the time of the shooting, a plea deal. 2 years in juvenile detention in exchange for his testimony against Haynes. 2 years for kicking in a door and shooting a 23-year-old woman multiple times. The public response was not subtle. The family was outraged. People who had been following the case couldn't make sense of it. And eventually, neither could the governor. Tim Walz stepped in and removed the case from the Hennepin County Attorney's Office entirely, a move that is genuinely rare. He handed it to State Attorney General Keith Ellison, who took it into adult court and pursued a sentence that actually reflected what had happened. Faux Camara was ultimately facing up to 10 years for his guilty plea to second-degree murder. His older brother, the 17-year-old, was also charged. The county's handling of this case became its own story, a reminder that the pursuit of a conviction against the orchestrator sometimes comes at the expense of the people he used to carry it out. Families watching cases like this often have no say in those calculations. Zaria's family had none either, until the governor made a different call. Erick Haynes pleaded guilty. Not to a reduced charge, not to a lesser version of events. He pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, specifically to orchestrating the killing of Zaria McKeever. The sentencing hearing took place in 2025, roughly 2.5 years after Zaria died on that apartment floor. Zaria's family had been waiting the entire time. Her mother, her sister Tiffany, the people who had watched a 1-year-old grow into a 4-year-old without her mother. They had, in their own words, been fighting for a long time. Tired, worn down by delays and controversy, and a legal process that had taken more turns than it should have. They showed up anyway. At the sentencing, Zaria's loved ones were given time to speak. They took it. For an hour, they told the court who Zaria was, what her absence had cost them, and what it had cost her daughter. They described a nightmare that didn't end when they woke up. They talked about a little girl who would never have her mother at her first day of school, her graduation, her wedding. Then it was Haynes's turn. He spoke for 4 seconds. "I just want to say sorry to the family of Miss McKeever." That was it. Zaria's mother didn't let it pass quietly. Standing in that courtroom, she looked at the man who had arranged her daughter's death and said exactly what those 4 seconds deserved. "You owed us more than those words, and we didn't get it." She was right, but she got something else instead. Hennepin County Judge William Koch handed down a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Before he did, he made something clear for the record. Even though Erick Haynes never walked through that door, even though he never held the gun, never fired a shot, never even got out of the car, the judge stated plainly, "You are responsible for Zaria not being here." The judge also noted, without much softness, that a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 30 years does not mean release after 30 years. It means eligibility. Whether Haynes ever walks out depends on decisions made decades from now by people who weren't in that courtroom. For now, he is in prison. All 5 people connected to Zaria's death have pleaded guilty. The case that once looked like it might fracture under the weight of its own institutional controversy ultimately held together. Zaria's family called it a step, not an ending, a step, towards something that might, eventually, resemble healing. Love to Death Channel. Zaria's daughter was 1 year old the night her mother was killed. She is 4 now. She will grow up knowing her mother's name from people who loved her, from a grandmother who stood in a courtroom and demanded more than a 4-second apology, from an aunt who watched her sister get followed on what should have been an ordinary Monday and couldn't have known it was the last one they'd have together. That little girl will never have a memory of her mother. What she'll have instead is the version of Zaria that the people who knew her keep alive. The woman who was pushing forward, who had enrolled in school, who had made the decision to leave a man who was pulling her under and build something better for both of them. That decision cost Zaria her life, not because it was wrong, because Erick Haynes decided it was unacceptable. There is a particular kind of danger in a man who has already been told twice by a court to stay away from someone and ignored it both times. Not because the protection orders didn't matter, but because to him they clearly didn't. The legal system put a line in front of Erick Haynes in 2019. He crossed it. Then it drew another one. He crossed that too. By November 2022, there was no line he was going to respect. Zaria's sister Tiffany said it plainly after the arrest. Zaria knew he was a downfall. She was bettering her life. She knew exactly what he represented, and she had made her choice. She just couldn't have known he would take that choice as a reason to have her killed. What happened in that apartment is not complicated to understand. A man couldn't accept that a woman had moved on. He had the resources, a gun, a car, 2 teenagers willing to follow him, and he used them. He constructed a plan that kept his own hands technically clean and put the physical risk entirely on 2 kids who were 15 and 17 years old. He sat in the parking lot. He waited. When it went wrong, when the 17-year-old got shot, when the boyfriend escaped, when it became clear that Zaria was the one who died instead of the person he'd actually targeted, he drove one of the teenagers to get medical attention and presumably hoped the rest would sort itself out. It did sort itself out, just not the way he intended. 5 guilty pleas, a life sentence, a case that drew enough public outrage to pull a governor into a county murder prosecution, and a 4-year-old girl who will one day be old enough to read all of it. Tiffany Epps, Zaria's sister, said something after the arrest that has stayed with this case since the beginning. She said, "If you see signs, if you notice things, if someone is giving you reason to be afraid, start making reports. Call police, protect yourself by any means, because you never know what could happen." She wasn't speaking abstractly. She was speaking from the specific, brutal experience of watching her sister be followed on a Monday and burying her on a Tuesday. The signs were there, the stalking, the threats, the car appearing where it shouldn't. The pattern was visible. What was missing was a system, or a moment, that could have interrupted it before it reached that door. That's the part that doesn't resolve neatly. The sentence is handed down. The case is closed. The family begins the long work of trying to carry what was left behind. But Zaria McKeever was 23 years old. She had a daughter. She had a plan. She had made the hard, correct decision to leave. And none of that was enough to protect her from a man who had already proven, twice, that he didn't accept the word no. Remember her name. Love to Death Channel. If this case stayed with you, subscribe to Love to Death Channel for more true crime stories covering the cases that don't get enough attention. Real people, real consequences. No filler. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Fair use notice. This video is produced for educational and commentary purposes only. All footage and images used in this video fall under fair use guidelines as protected under Section 107 of the U.S. Copyright Act.
Just seen also Zaria is dead. She got shot 8 times, once in the head.
No,
This wasn't just some accident. There's cameras all over that hotel. There's cameras in the parking lot. And I already know what happened, and I know you're not telling me the truth.
Why did you say that? He told me not to tell whenever he's going to kill my family. He wanted me to act like he wasn't there. He said if I take the blame, that I'm not going to go down for long. He said kids get it easy.